I'm going back to that time when I was 3 and being told to respect black authority. So when they tell me that, I'm not going to look at them and go, you might be seeing things, right? When you say there's racism, you might be crazy. Because I remember being 3 and my mom saying, respect your teachers. And who were those teachers? They were black women. So I think that foundation, and then the mentors that I met along the way, most of them in New Orleans, really made all the difference. But I think if it hadn't been for my family and that foundation, it would have been a very different road. You know?
You did a documentary, of which we're very fortunate to be playing immediately after this program. I think we have a clip that we can show here. I want to play the clip and then come back and talk to you about it.
Great.
Today, there are more African Americans in prison or jail on probation or parole than were enslaved in 1850, a decade before the Civil War began.
White like me. Where did that come from?
Well, you know, most of us have heard of, if we haven't read, the old book Black Like Me by John Howard Griffin. It was written and released in 1960, written in 59, released in 60 as I recall. And this was a story of a white guy, white journalist, who decided that the only way that he could raise consciousness and really understand for himself what it was to be black was to take medicine, do UV rays for like 3 months and become black for the summer and then go through the South and experience it and then write about it. And I remember reading that when I was in high school, like a lot of us did. And I remember thinking, okay, that's nice, but why don't we just talk about what it means not to be black? Because those of us who are white never going to be black. We don't know that story except secondhand. I said, why don't we just talk about what it means to be white? What does it mean to be white in a country that was set up by people like you for people like you? And so I feel that if we could talk about privilege, if we could talk about our own experiences with advantage, the flip side of black and brown oppression, that we'd have a better insight. And so I first wrote a book called that back in '04, and then decided, you know, had some folks at the Media Education Foundation that said this would make a great film, and it would be a good way for visual learners who maybe aren't going to get into the memoir, they're not going to enjoy the book, but can see on the screen the manifestations of privilege, hear voices like Michelle Alexander, hear voices like John Bracey, hear voices like Martin Gillens talk about this history, and then put it together also with some autobiographical stuff. I just figured it'd be a different way to present the same material.
Bill O'Reilly, Fox News, grew up in Long Island, New York, in a very segregated,
completely segregated
neighborhood.
Yep.
And absolutely denies that there's anything called white privilege.
Right. I mean, it's the greatest irony for a guy who grew up in Levittown, which was a community established by its developer to be racially segregated. When they asked Levitt, the guy that started these developments, whether or not he was going to have them integrated, he said, look, I can solve the race problem or I can solve the housing problem. I choose to solve the housing problem. So he maintained segregated neighborhoods in which Bill O'Reilly grew up, and yet he says he never experienced white privilege because he wasn't rich. But see, white privilege isn't about being rich. If you can live in a middle-class neighborhood like Levittown in the 1950s and in the 1960s at a time that, and you got a FHA loan, your family got a government-backed loan to get that house, and then you're going to say that you've never benefited from whiteness, you're just not paying attention, or you are and you're lying. Any white person that was born before 1964, when the Civil Rights Act was passed, by definition was born into white privilege. I don't even know how anybody could argue that point. And I would say that since 1964, even though some things have changed on the books, the institutionalization of inequality is such that even those of us born after are still reaping privileges. You know, I think about the killing of Eric Garner, I think about the killing of Mike Brown and all these other young black men, and I think about all the things that I did when I was that age, criminal things for which I could be doing hard time right now, selling drugs, using drugs, running a fake ID mill to help white people drink underage in bars in New Orleans, grand theft, vandalism of government property. I did a lot of these things before I was 20, and I've gone through and looked at the statutes. If I'd been caught for all these things, I could be doing 30 to 40 years, but I'm not, because nobody came to my dorm room.